film presence that guaranteed credulity, guaranteed belief, you know? Few actors have it, and he bloody well had it.
He was wondrous. His eyes, they said everything. He really had just an extraordinary face. Whatever he thought showed, you know. He was gorgeous.
He was and has been described as the quintessential American hero. And he understood that, and he accepted his responsibility. And he was a forthright, quiet, wonderful man.
I think one of the reasons that Gary Cooper could become the all-American hero to so many people, to his public, I think it's because he very truly never felt that he was any different than the average Joe down the street. I remember hearing that from day one up until the last week that he was alive. I'm a simple guy who got lucky. Along with that was his sense that we have in us the ability to be our best self. He was as human as anybody. But in his roles and in the characters that he chose to play, his deep belief was in the nobility of the American spirit. It probably sounds corny, but he really felt that.
He was born Frank James Cooper in Helena, Montana in 1901. The parents were English. Charles Cooper, Gary's father, apprenticed himself to a law firm and eventually was elected to the Supreme Court of Montana.
They lived in Montana. They had a ranch outside of Helena called the 7 Bar 9. So he and his older brother Arthur grew up on that ranch. His mother was very elegant, very English, but she was also terribly strong. I mean, I think she could have crossed in a covered wagon and done very, very well.
All the things that you associate with the West, the frontier, cowboys and Indians, buffalo, range, homesteaders versus free rangers, gun battles, all that sort of stuff was living memory to everybody that Cooper knew when he was a boy. Cooper, for a while, actually went to a school with some Indian children.
He was taught how to ride, I think, by the Indians, in fact, and they were his buddies.
Because of this Wild West background, his mother felt that he was getting to be too much of a rough fellow and wanted to polish him up and send him to school in England. And so Cooper and his older brother, by 6 years, Arthur, went to Dunstable School in 1910 and stayed there for 3 years. This meant that Cooper had to change from being a cowboy and Indian sort of Wild West boy to a rather polished English schoolboy with proper manners.
When he came back from England, by then Arthur was of fighting age and the war was approaching. He went off to fight, and my father then kind of ran the ranch with his mother because Judge Cooper had to be minding the court. So my father and his mother really kept the ranch going for that period of time when Arthur was away. I know he's had that reputation over his life as being a loner, and I think it started even as a youngster.
Cooper was the sort of guy who liked to go out on his own, hunting and fishing and talking to the Indians, and the fact that he was an extraordinarily tall boy and sort of shot up during his early teen years, pretty close to his final height of about 6'3".
He went to high school in bits and pieces, and then he went to university at Grinnell in Iowa for 2 years.
He worked as a waiter and doing odd jobs and shoveling snow and repairing things, and was generally known as just a unremarkable sort of fellow, not particularly academic, not particularly athletic, nor was he particularly talented either, because he didn't even make the dramatic club. at Grinnell.
He was more interested in art and drawing. When I came across some of his old school books, and the pages are filled with drawings and sketches of Indians and saddles. Clearly nature, and living in Montana, growing up as they did on a ranch, that was clearly very, very much a part of his whole being. I know my father always considered himself extremely lucky because the whole acting career was never anything that he had even dreamt about in the beginning. He went to Hollywood and he found it was very hard to earn any money that you could live on.
He's had 2 years of college. He's more or less given up hopes of becoming a commercial artist. He has one great skill, the ability to ride a horse, and he's great looking. So he runs into some pals from Montana and they say, you can make $5 a day by being an extra in movies, and you can make $10 a day by being a stuntman falling off a horse.
Coop worked in what they call Poverty Row in those days, down at Sunset and those areas where they'd come by every day and pick up 3 or 4 fellas and put them in a picture. And he did a lot of westerns because he was a good writer. That's how he earned his living.
After his career began to develop, his agent, a woman named Nan Collins, suggested that he really needed to change his name. There also was an actor with a very similar name. She said, this isn't going to work. So he said, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And she said, well, I'm from Gary, Indiana. How about Gary as a name? And he jumped at it. He did a few other shorts, a few other pictures. And then there was a Western called The Winning of Barbara Worth. And that brought him into some public attention. And then he was chosen to be in a movie called It. The star was Clara Bow, of course, a very big leading lady of the time. They seemed to hit it off extremely well together. There was chemistry on the screen. I guess there was chemistry off screen too.
She helped get him into Wings, the picture, that small part that he had that pyramided him into stardom.
He has a tiny 90-second but very significant part in a very, very important silent movie that won the first Academy Award for Best Picture. The 2 young pilot cadets come into his tent, and he's kind of the old veteran, and he's chewing a chocolate bar, and he said, well, I have to go out and do a couple of turns. You see the shadow of the plane crashing, and that's the end of Cooper.
And that one scene, he just exploded on the screen and became Paramount's most important leading man. The next year, after that small scene in Wings, he starred in 7 pictures here at Paramount. I don't know if anybody in our business during many, many years that had a career like Gary Cooper, just kept building and building and building over all the 120 pictures that he did. Coop had a lot of people that were very important in his life, and all the leading ladies adored him and wanted him in their picture as an extra, and then later as a leading man.
All these years that my father was working in pictures, they were still silent films. So many people who were big stars in the silence could not make that transition, mostly because the voice wasn't able to project. Luckily, my father didn't have that trouble. He always teased and laughed about that. He said, well, he had so much practice calling hogs and calling for the cattle out on the ranch. He had good lung power.
The first talking picture Gary Cooper did for us here at Paramount was The Virginian. He didn't have a lot of dialogue, but when he said it with such conviction, you listened and it meant something. He had great command. And that one thing where he said to Walter Houston, when you say that, smile, which became a saying for all the kids who were playing cowboys and Indians all over the country. They'd look at each other and say, when you say that to me, smile.
And it was very much my father's character to say simply that with the force to back it up. Once he began to make it, it was a tremendous rush. I mean, he was incredible looking. Everybody really started to go crazy about him. The women were chasing after him. The men thought he was wonderful. The Hollywood of the early days was quite different from today. The studio system was different. They built the stars differently. They protected the stars differently. The studios were very, very controlling about who their stars went out with. He managed to go where he wanted, with whom he wanted. It's interesting to me that he never had an inflated sense of himself. There was a wonderful Western expression that he taught me when I was very, very young. And I think I didn't realize what a lesson for life he was giving me. But it was something he learned with the cowboys. And he believed it, and he lived it. He said, "There ain't never a horse that couldn't be rode. There ain't never a rider that couldn't be throwed."
You're pretty brave with women.
What's the matter? Don't you like brave men?
Perhaps. You're changed. Soldier.
The first picture he did with Marlene Dietrich, who adored him and wanted him in a picture, was not the most pleasant picture, as I remember, for Coop. Joseph von Sternberg concentrated tremendously on Marlene Dietrich. And Coop felt that he was being a little neglected. He said, "I was a little peeved." And I thought it added greatly to the character he was playing in the picture.
You sound tired of life.
I don't know whether I am or not. I was when I joined this outfit. How about you, mademoiselle? Been on the stage very long?
Long enough.
Tired of it?
No.
You've got a lot of pictures with that man. Your husband?
Husband? I never found a man good enough for that.
That's just the way I feel about women.
He had that ability to be at home in a saddle or in a Western outfit on a Western street. He was equally at home and did many pictures in which he was in tails and tuxedos and well dressed. He could do any kind of a part, and he could do it well.
This was a sort of Cooper that people didn't know that much about. Somebody who, beginning in 1931-32, when he had gone to Europe and met the Countess de Frosso, an American millionairess, she'd entertained the highest society of Europe, including English royalty and nobility.
She was a very sophisticated woman. They became friends and spent 1 or 2 years together.
She is the one who made his taste so divine. He had impeccable taste. His clothes were made by tailors. And fabulous shoes, fantastic shoes he had. And he had boots, you know, and then he had great sweaters, and I mean, he had the best clothes in the world.
She brought him a certain kind of sophistication that he had not had before. He took to it very naturally. She introduced him to areas of culture that he wouldn't have been exposed to in Montana.
Well, Farewell to Arms was Cooper's first Hemingway film, and he made it before he knew Hemingway.
Don't let her die. Oh, God, please don't let her die. I'll do anything for you if you don't let her die. You took the baby. That was all right. But don't let her die. Please. Please. Dear God, don't let her die.
wonderful Helen Hayes, she told me that she really fell head over heels in love with my father when she was doing the picture. They were rehearsing a scene, and she said, I know if Gary had said to me, I would have left my husband, I would have left my children, I would have left Hollywood, I would have left anything just to come and be with him. She said all he did was take me very gently, very sweetly by my shoulders, and he just said, Helen,
You're a fine girl, a brave girl.
Yes, I am a brave girl.
Whatever happens, you'll not be afraid.
I'll not be afraid.
We've never been apart, really, not since we met,
Not since we met.
and never can be,
Never parted.
in life and in death. Say it, Kath.
In life and in death, we'll never be parted.
You do believe that, don't you, Kath?
I believe it. And I'm not afraid.
it's fair to say, in whatever situation my father was in, he enjoyed it to the hilt, but after a certain period of time, not terribly long, he was always ready to leave. My mother's name was Veronica Balfe, originally. Her mother and father were divorced. By the time my mother was 17, she really didn't like the New York social scene. She wanted to get out. She was a bit of a rebel. She wanted to do her own thing. So she came with her chaperone to California, and as her mother's brother was Cedric Gibbons, the great art director, her mother felt she was in safe hands. She was not like the Hollywood type of women who he had been with. And I suppose it was a time in his life that maybe he wanted to think about settling down. My mother's nickname has always been Rocky. She has tremendous strength, great vitality, and this tremendous shyness, which I suspect probably, aside from the fact that she was terrific looking, just a knockout, I suspect my father reacted to that as well. They were married in 1933, and they really were tremendous best friends and companions. She was very much of an athlete. She would organize all kinds of sports activities for him. My father loved to shoot. He loved guns. My mother refused to kill anything, but knowing my father loved shooting, she took up skeet shooting. She became so good, she was California State Women's Skeet Champion. My father loved it. He was so proud. He'd take her down to the gun club, and she would outshoot a lot of his male buddies. My father was extremely shy. That is the truth. And some of the screen business that one sees, that really came out of a natural shyness. As he got more and more professional, he learned to utilize it.
I don't think I ever saw a picture that I loved more than Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. When I think back over the greats of the business, I can't think of another person really that ranks with him.
He's news.
He's the guy that's wholesome and sweet.
Now, Your Honor, this is absurd. The woman's obviously in love with him. If Miss Dawson here wasn't with me, I'd probably knock your heads together.
Oh, I don't mind.
Well, all right, maybe I will. Hand me my pants.
You have no pants, sir. You came home last night without them.
Don't be silly, Walter. I couldn't run around the streets without any clothes. I'd be arrested.
That's what the two policemen said, sir.
When Frank Capra called Gary Cooper and said he wanted to do Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Cooper, of course, was ready right away.
I think Capra read my father very well. I think he read his inner core very well. It was such a completely comfortable role for my father to take. He felt that if he just knew the character, studied what the character was about, how the character would think if he were him, then Papa said, well, I don't have to act. Then I can just be.
Cooper never seemed to be doing anything when he was acting. He seemed to be so minimal as to be virtually ineffectual. And yet, over and over and over again, this story is told that when the rushes were shown, everybody was dazzled by how great the performance was.
Well, there you are, Grant's tomb. Hope you're not disappointed.
It's wonderful.
To most people, it's an awful letdown.
Huh?
I say to most people, it's a washout.
Well, that depends on what they see.
Now, what do you see?
Me? Oh, I see a small Ohio farm boy becoming a great soldier. I see thousands of marching men. I see General Lee with a broken heart surrendering. And I can see the beginning of a new nation, like Abraham Lincoln said. And I can see that Ohio boy being inaugurated as president. Things like that can only happen in a country like America. Excuse me.
I guess Mr. Deeds would be as close to him as a man that I knew. I think it was boyish charm. I think that's what my mother saw in him, boyish charm. And I thought he was handsome and tall and a good actor.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Gary Cooper remained such a big star. When you saw Coop on the screen, you always wanted to be on his side.
I saw him in The Plainsman at least 10 times. It was on the bill with the theater where I was dancing on stage, so I got to see it whenever I wanted to.
Yellow hand, find out now which way soldier go. Listening! Estana, Guita, Mahawa.
Yes, Calamity. I do. I love you.
Very impressive in his gentleness and his directness and sincerity. I think that rang true with everyone that ever saw him right away, his sincerity.
Beau Geste was one of the best films for me that he made.
You don't want to stay here and die like rats in a trap, do you?
I saw it several times as a boy. You see, he was surrounded by wonderful actors, but he carried the whole film. It's a film about brothers and loyalty and looking out for each other.
Gary Cooper was very selective in the parts that he took, and he turned down an awful lot. And his good friend Joel McCrea, who was a big star on the lot too, idolized Gary Cooper, and Joel used to say, you know, I do all of the pictures that Coop rejects.
He was always himself. He played well within his own personality. That's what we loved about him.
My father liked doing comedy, and he had a real sense of timing, which I think was sadly not explored enough.
For you send up 5 hamburgers with all the trimmings, 5 chocolate ice cream sodas, and 5 pieces of apple pie. No, apple with cheese. Yeah, thanks.
Hello there.
Frank Capra was instrumental in so many people's lives, Jean Arthur, Jimmy Stewart, Gary Cooper. And Cooper just adored Capra. I think all Frank Capra had to do would be to call Coop and say, I'm starting a picture in 3 weeks. Coop, they say, fine, when do you need me?
Two great films with Frank Capra. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Meet John Doe. He becomes everyman. He becomes the small town yokel. He's naive, he's idealistic, he's provincial, and all the smart city slickers think they can pull the wool over his eyes. Of course they can't, because in Capra the common man prevails.
People are finally finding out that the guy next door isn't a bad egg. That's simple, isn't it? And yet a thing like that's got a chance of spreading till it touches every last doggone human being in the world, and you talk about killing it. Why, when this fire dies down, what's going to be left? More misery, more hunger, and more hate. And what's to prevent that from starting all over again? Nobody knows the answer to that one, and certainly not you with those slimy, bollocked-up theories you got.
I had really an extraordinarily lucky childhood. I had two parents who were so strong and supportive, and I would say loaded with common sense. One of the points they always made was, look, all this stuff that's going on around us, it has nothing to do with you. It comes with the territory of the work your father does, and it's work, and you're gonna have to make your life, do your own thing. In those days they worked 6 days a week shooting, so there wasn't a lot of late night partying when he was doing a film. But on the weekends, a lot of the buddies would be over. Claudette Colbert and her husband, they were close friends of ours. Gable and Van Johnson, and Arlene Dahl and Lex Barker, and Jimmy Stewart was so close to the family. The experience for me of growing up in that atmosphere was really incredible. Because my father had access to anybody, anywhere, any time, any place, meeting some of the most creative and exciting people in the world. Hemingway, Pablo Picasso, people in the arts, people in the sciences. It was the natural fabric of my life, of our life. Guns were part of his frontier persona, and he never lost that. We had a gun room at home, which was a game room. There was a billiard table and saddles and some memorabilia and things, but it was his gun room. And he would spend hours taking care of his guns, cleaning them, oiling them.
He took us into the gun room in his home, and he had them in cases, beautifully arranged, and this was part of their life. They would go out and on their free time, would travel to places. Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, and his other friends, they would go out and do their shoots and have a hell of a good time.
Ernest Hemingway and my father were buddies. They just had a basic camaraderie, buddy-buddy kind of a feeling. They loved to go out shooting together. They loved the wild country. Because my father was not, quote, an actor, didn't have any Hollywood airs about him. I think it was a natural friendship that he and Hemingway felt there was a very close link between the two of them. Alvin York, the pacifist who didn't want to fight, but when pushed to it, he knew what he had to do. I would say that was Gary Cooper, too.
Alvin,
Yeah?
Alvin, I just...
Yeah?
Alvin, you...
My first day on the set of shooting Sergeant York, I was, of course, apprehensive, nervous, playing with a big star, a legend, and being his leading lady in a big movie. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to call him. I didn't know what he was going to call me. We didn't have any formal introduction. If he called me Joan, would I have had to call him Gary? He settled the whole thing for me in 1 minute. He said, "How do you do, Miss Gracie?" So I said, "Oh, thank goodness, he didn't call me Joan. He called me Gracie, and I called him Alvin whenever I met him on the lot, at lunch or on the set. And I thought it was a most considerate thing that he did. He knew that I was a youngster, I was inexperienced, I was 16 years old. The break of my life to work with him and to work on this picture. And he probably knew that if he didn't handle me right, I'd bolt for the door in a veil of tears. So that was one very important point settled.
They won't get me. I'll go back in them hills.
You ain't even put hounds on your trail and follow you no matter how far back you go.
Then they better not catch up with me, or they'll be a-wishing they hadn't. York, take over. The only non-com left. The rest of you keep under cover. Come back here. Where are you going? You didn't give me command.
My father hated fighting. Loathed it. He would do almost anything to avoid an argument. But don't step over the line.
Gary Cooper won his first Academy Award for Sergeant York.
Actor Award. Lieutenant James Stewart, last year's winner, presents the cherished statuette to Gary Cooper. He wins his Oscar for a vivid portrayal of Sergeant York.
There have been some actors that you look at and they were true Americans. Jimmy Stewart, Jim Cagney, Gary Cooper. And I think when you looked at his pictures, it made you proud that you were an American.
Pride of the Yankees, I think, kind of symbolized one of the elements that was important to my father, which was trying to grasp what it was that made a hero. And I think that the challenge of playing that role, the role of Lou Gehrig, who not only was a fabulous athlete, but who took the news of a terminal sentence years and years before his time, the way he handled that, with courage, with dignity, I think that kind of a role, I think my father just loved it.
Lou Gehrig, of course, was left-handed, Coop was right-handed. What they had to do in the background, all the letterings were all reversed, and he threw right-handed. And of course, when the film was developed and shown, they reversed the film so it looked like he was throwing left-hand, and all of the letters were reading properly.
Tanglefoot? The story of an American hero, cheered and idolized by millions, a symbol of courage and true sportsmanship. The pride of the Yankees, a strange and fascinating drama in the real life of a man, his hopes, his dreams. In a nationwide poll, millions of Americans voted one man to play the coveted role. That man, Academy Award-winning Gary Cooper. Teresa Wright is the woman who loved and understood him.
Lou Gehrig, I think I could learn to like you.
Well, you've been out with me 4 days in a row, and you're out with me here tonight. Well, isn't that what best girls do?
Today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
When my father went to the South Pacific to entertain the soldiers, he was very, very nervous because he said, God, you know, I'm not Bob Hope, I'm not Jack Benny, I don't have a line of comedy and patter, and I can't sing. How can I entertain the guys? And one of the colonels at the base said to him, you know, Coop, the main thing the guys want to hear from you is, would you please do the Lou Gehrig speech for them? And he said he would never forget that moment. You know, talking to 1,000 or more guys about to go into battle. The instinctive roles that he took were compatible with his philosophy, I think compatible with his nature. If anyone wants to have a sense of something that he believed, the lines of John Donne, For Whom the Bell Tolls, that poem was one of my father's favorites. No man is an island entire unto itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main.
If there's nothing to do for you, I'll sit by you and watch you. Any of the nights we'll make love.
You are shameless.
If you don't love me, I love you enough for both.
When the time to play For Whom the Bell Tolls came, Hemingway wanted Cooper to be in it. Hemingway knew about Cooper through certain mutual friends like Dietrich and Bergman, and gave the hero of the novel before he met Cooper some of the Cooper attributes. He comes from Montana, for example, and he's, tall and lean as Cooper is.
I admired Coop, even though I did not agree with his politics, because he never, ever imposed them on the people around him. I know that he felt very strongly about a communist influence in pictures.
I have never read Karl Marx, and I don't know the basis of communism beyond what I've picked up from hearsay. What I've heard, I don't like it, because it isn't on the level.
I was sitting in the first or second row of the audience, which was a big audience. We were in quite a big room. There must have been, well, there were at least several hundred people. The place was always crowded. I was surprised to see Gary Cooper because I didn't think he would bring anything to the hearings, and he didn't. All he brought was his personality, and that's what they were looking for.
I am not in nearly as good a position to know as some of the witnesses that have been ahead of me, because I'm not a very active member in our guild.
Yes, he said how he felt. He was against communism and the people who were part of it, but he never named anybody. He never got involved in that sense. And that, to me, tells more about him than anything else, because I had so many friends that were ruined, and not rightly so.
This is Howard Roark, possessed of a great talent, but unwilling to compromise his ideals at any price. Dominique Francon, the kind of woman who could enslave any man except one.
As the expression goes into every life, a little rain falls. And I suppose maybe in Hollywood, maybe that seems to start sooner than other cases. My father had done a film called The Fountainhead with Patricia Neal. And during the making of that film, they fell in love.
She'd no pride left to stop me. She'll love you without dignity, without regret. Would it please you to hear that I've lived in torture all these months, hoping never to find you and wishing to give my life just to see you once more?
We went on location first, and that, but oh my dear, from that moment on, I just loved him. I really did, and it's terrible of me considering he was a married man. But that didn't mean a thing to me because it was terrible of me to do in those days, which one does when one's young. But really, to me, he was the beauty of the world.
My mother and father both, I think, handled it very, very sensitively from my point of view, very intelligently. And I was never made to feel that there was any lack of love for me, or that I was responsible, or that his attitude toward me had changed. In fact, my mother was very strong, really admonishing me not to blame him. She, in effect, said, these things happen in life, and your father loves you very much. Nothing will ever change that. And you know, we'll work it out. We'll see it through. Even during the time that they were separated, we continued doing things together as a family at odd periods, and we'd spend a couple of months together going off and doing a lot of fun things and family things.
We worked together. We did USS Tea Kettle with Henry Hathaway. Henry Hathaway had an affliction. He had to pick on someone. Everybody in the cast had to go through 2 weeks of hell from him. I thought, well, he wouldn't dare do that with Cooper, but sure, it was Cooper's time. And Cooper just sort of gulped and looked at him and didn't answer back. And then he gave it to him again, you know. And he moved away, and he went in back of the props of the prop wall and banged on the side of the set. Cooper came back and he told me, he says, that's my way of handling him. And he can hear me doing that, then he's a good director. So I put up with it.
He made a number of unremarkable films from around the mid-40s until 1951. Cooper looked his age and more. He was lined in a way and looked like he had been through it, partly because he had had ulcers and back problems and hip injuries. And then Stanley Kramer, who was an independent producer, had a marvelous script from Carl Foreman, High Noon.
I mean it. If you won't go with me now, I'll be on that train when it leaves here.
I've got to stay.
A terror-stricken town left him to face 4 killers, single-handed, at high noon.
And at one point, when he's been abandoned by everybody, his deputies, his friends, the townsfolk, his former mistress, his wife, he goes into his office and closes the door and writes out his last will, and then he puts his head on the table and he cries because he's afraid. And that's so moving. And it's so antithetical to the thousands of cowboy movies that have been made where the hero is untouchable and invulnerable and can shoot 100 people and nothing will ever happen to him.
Seems like all everybody and his brother wants is to get me out of town.
Nobody wants to see you get killed. Hold it, where you going?
I don't know, back to the office, I guess.
Oh, no, you're getting on that horse and you're getting out. What's the matter with you? You were ready to do it yourself, you said so.
Look, Harv, I thought about it because I was tired. You think about a lot of things when you're tired, but I can't do it.
It's a classic American film of how a man has to deal with evil on his own. So this is really going way beyond what anybody had ever done in a Western before. Cooper won his second Academy Award, the first being for Sergeant York.
The loneliness that Cooper had in his private life, I think that came out in the picture. Like everybody in our business, you have hills and you have valleys. And at that particular time, Coop said, I need a good picture. And boy, did he get it in High Noon. Whew, did he get it. And those of us that knew him oftentimes worried about things that were happening to him that were not pleasant. The separation from his family at one time, which was unfortunate, which just tore him apart at times.
I didn't intend to break up the marriage when we started, but it was real deep love. Things were happening to him. He had to go to the hospital. It was an ulcer. Because what you're doing is eating you up. And I called his mother, hoping she would say something delicious to me. But she didn't. She said, you know, it's all your fault. And it disturbed me, and I called Gary, and I said, this is it. And he was in the hospital, and he was upset, but so I didn't see him then. That broke us up.
Whatever decision-making process he went through when he decided he wanted to come back home, those are always mutual decisions, you know. It takes two. I think it's stupid to say you go back, because you don't go back to anything. You either have the wherewithal to pick up and start again. And the two of them did, and as a family we did.
Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster, the quiet man and the gunslinger, fighting side by side, and each other.
Each one of those 6 boxes contains $500,000 in gold.
How do we know we can trust you?
How do I know I can trust you?
Countess, you're beginning to talk my language.
Looks like we tied up with the wrong outfit.
We were so surprised because I'd only done about 30 pages of script with a fellow named Borden Chase, and Gary Cooper said, yes, I'll do the picture. Burt Lancaster was going to play the lead in the picture. So it came as a big surprise even to Burt. God, he welcomed it with open arms. He said, gee, this really puts us in the big time. With Coop, I'll play the villain. Everything was perfect from then on, gosh. Until the very end of the picture, I'd begun to like Burt so much in the picture as the villain that I said, I don't think we should kill him, Coop. And he said, well, I wouldn't finish the picture if I didn't kill him.
In many ways, Gary Cooper was one of the most moral men I ever knew. I think that's why he loved to make Westerns, because the Western is the most moral story you can tell. It's a good against evil with a good winning out.
So many people refer to Gary Cooper as the American hero. Sometimes they say the last American hero. In a film sense, he certainly became almost a mythic figure. There have been so many magazine covers that pick up on the image as heroic. So many heroes today let people down right away.
I don't think Cooper would ever be accepted as a villain. You accepted him as a man who could rise to the occasion to defeat evil and confront all kinds of problems. I don't think that Cooper was the most versatile actor. There are actors who can play many parts, and there are actors who can play themselves very well. But when you looked in his face, when you played a scene with him, he had the ability to maintain heroic presentations because he had a higher inner life in his eyes.
They used to say the camera loves him or the camera loves her. And it depended on how they photographed and how they came across. And I think mostly it's in the eyes and in the attitude and a general attitude of life.
He did a great many Westerns, and yet could play romantic leads. 2 pictures with Marlene Dietrich, Morocco and Desire, in which he was stunningly good-looking. He could do that, too, even when he was older. When he did Love in the Afternoon with Audrey Hepburn, who must have been then at least 20 years younger than he still could manage that.
Gary Cooper, fabulous as the world's greatest connoisseur of women, who has hunted the species from Stockholm to Siam. Audrey Hepburn, delightfully, completely innocent. How can anyone blame her for being dazzled?
He's certainly the most handsome man in your files.
He's certainly the most utterly no good.
He's got such an American face. Like a cowboy or Abraham Lincoln.
How many other men were there?
You mean before I met you, or since I met you, or all together?
Quit stalling.
Billy Wilder felt that he had to disguise the age difference by keeping Cooper's face somewhat in the shadows, somewhat gauzy, somewhat misty. I think Cooper was still great looking then. There's certainly no reason why a beautiful young girl couldn't fall in love with a super rich, super sophisticated, super charming, late 50s American.
I think there was a lot of latent sexuality in Coop. He's known as a guy who wasn't afraid of women by any chance. But I'll tell you, he was kind. We were on location in Yakima, Washington. Somebody came up to his trailer and said, there's a couple of kids and they want your autograph. Now, I would never get out of my trailer and go down. Man got up, walked down, about a quarter of a mile, signed the autographs. I saw him come back myself. And, that was the kind of sweetness he had in his nature.
We were on a fairly long location in London. Neither of us had our wives along. I remember Coop took me out to dinner one night. As we were edging our way between the tables towards the exit, we passed a table of 5 or 6. This was the time of the mods and the rockers, and they dressed in rather bizarre ways and behaved in a rather bizarre fashion. And as we walked past, Coop in the lead, one of them said, oh, there goes the big cowboy star. Coop stopped and looked at him. And he said, when you say that, smile. They didn't know that that was one of the key lines which, in effect, made Coop a star. Suddenly, this kid was looking up, and he wasn't in a trendy West End London restaurant. He was standing in the middle of a dirt street, and there was Gary Cooper in front of him. Nobody at the table moved a muscle or blinked. And Coop looked at him for a full 40 seconds, and then he nodded and walked out. Coop was settling himself into the back of his Rolls Royce, straightening the creases on his trousers. And I said, you gave that line a very good reading, Coop. He said, well, I've had a lot of practice.
He was offered a particular kind of picture, of course, in which the character was immensely heroic. And I think that he was happy in that niche. But occasionally, challenges would come along, as in the case of The Naked Edge, which is the picture that I did with him, which was his final film. In it, he plays a suspected murderer, way out of character for anything that he had done before. And he took the part despite some very, very fierce opposition from many of his advisors.
I can't believe this. We've been married too many years. We know each other. We know everything about each other. Do you think a woman could live with a man, can sleep with him and not know she's sleeping with a murderer?
Do murderers make love differently?
Come on, Martha.
He wouldn't have admitted being there just to build up a lie.
He said he was there?
Yes. He saw it happen.
That's unfortunate for him.
He wanted to try another kind of a persona, another kind of role. The audience was supposed to believe that he was the bad guy. At the end of it, he said, they just wouldn't believe it. If he ever felt restricted, I think maybe it was that he couldn't range too far afield because he had to make the public happy.
It was a terrible blow to Hemingway to find out that Cooper was dying, and he found out the way everybody else did by seeing James Stewart accept this honorary Oscar for Cooper in March 1961 and then break down and sort of inadvertently reveal that Cooper was too sick to come and get the award himself.
He gave me a wonderful lesson because we went to play golf one day when he was still well enough to play. And I was thinking, walking around the golf course, who the hell cares? I mean, you know, so what if you hit a birdie or an eagle or if you're over par or under par? He's not going to be around in a month. You know, why care when you know time is so limited? And in fact, he cared even more. And it didn't matter that there wouldn't be very many tomorrows. It was focused on today. When he got the diagnosis of cancer, he opted not to do a lot of treatment for it. They didn't have as many options then as they do today. He said, I've had one hell of a great life, and he was very at peace with himself.
He was a child of his time, and I doubt if that could ever happen again. That kind of personality. We are too cynical now. It's like you can't make a Frank Capra movie anymore, you know, because there are no Frank Capras and there are no Gary Coopers. And it's sad, but true.